Welcome to this very special edition of the KJ Masterclass Live, the show which ensures that you profit from your time spent here with experts, either through the industry insights, information, or simply learning from them. And today we have Roula Abou Haidar. She is a founder and podcast host of the Life Affairs podcast. Welcome to the show, Roula.
Hi, Ajay. I'm glad to be here.
You are welcome. Welcome to the show. You are welcome to India in this online form, Rolla. And I'm sure not just in India, but a lot of people across the globe will benefit from what we are going to talk right now. We'll be talking about fostering human connection. But before we come to this point, talking on this, let's talk a bit about your journey, Rolla. For several places from Lebanon to Europe and to, understanding the world in your own manner. So help us and give us a bit of an understanding of your own journey.
Here we go. I grew up in Lebanon in the war, in times of war. The war raised me, and I was raised by the neighbors and everyone looking after each other's children and looking after each one's safety. I did not even imagine that one day I will be living in Europe. But it happened, and I got the chance to travel for work. While traveling, I met my husband and moved to the Netherlands. This is why I say I'm living a dream, not because I have richness in material things. I'm living a dream because my hopes when I was living in a war was to live in a safe country with rules and regulation. People respect everything. I'm not saying it's perfect here, but it's my journey from dreaming about getting out of the war and living in safety is the dream that I'm living. This came with a price, and the price is the connection, a human connection. I left a place where people are so connected, looking after each other and caring for each other's, to a place where I felt lonely. And there is this kind of solitude where people do not connect, do not talk to each other. It took me 23 years to realize that this is the point of my unhappiness. This is what I need. I want the connection, the deep conversations. I want to know what's going on in other people's world, so it helped me improve my world. And that brought me to my podcast, the Life Affairs podcast, where I connect with people and we have deep conversations about everything in life. So that's a little bit where I come from.
Absolutely. So is that emptiness gone with the podcast, or it's still there, or at least it has done it whatever it could do?
In a way, I don't want it to be gone because it inspires me. It's the path that I'm walking. Every emptiness comes with a topic. And this is a topic that I find a good guest to discuss and go deeper in it.
Right. And you do you also manage to connect with the connections through this podcast that you were missing back home in perhaps in Lebanon and other places? Does that fulfill that for you?
Absolutely. Something remarkable happened is that I truly realized that we all have the same kind of lives, no matter from which country or where we are born, what our life has been. Life experiences are the same. It's either we don't talk about them, we're too shy to bring them up, or embarrassed. But the connection is there. It didn't matter where I come from. I connected because we have truly the same essence of being a human being and living our lives.
Absolutely, Rola. I can relate to that because, see, being a podcast host myself, you are yourself a podcast host. So we get a chance to, to reach to people's homes in a way that, that not everyone will have that chance to. Other your guests, other podcast hosts, when you are connecting with them, they let you into their lives, into their homes. I think many of them, they do it from their rooms, many people from drawing rooms. You can see the sun coming through their windows. Maybe it is evening time. You can see many other things. You almost feel that it is no different than your own setting, and only the few things are different. And that that makes you feel so connected to others. Earlier, I used to think I've done more than 1,000 interviews in the last 2, 3 years, and I can tell you, earlier I used to think, that people in the US might be having different sort of a life, and but when you through your podcast, when you are able to look into their houses, into the drawing rooms, into the settings, it looks like any other place in your own sphere, except that there's a few things here and there will be different, and that is, I guess, a deep human connection in itself if you look at it from that point of view. What your thoughts on this?
I agree with you. I have a needy cat, so maybe you will hear the cat like meowing behind the door and while we're having a serious conversation. Life happens. The other day I was recording an episode and my son couldn't sleep, so he came down to the office to tell me he cannot sleep, and he came on the screen. I hugged him, said goodnight to him, and we continued our conversation. It's so we are who we are, and when we go to the office we're different people because we are in the setting of the office. When we record an episode on the podcast, most of the time, as you said, it's from people's homes. Sometimes it's even from their bedroom, from their kitchen, and you are transported into the world of others, not only in conversation, but indeed in the setting. You see the color of their walls, their favorite painting behind them. It's deep connection. And this is what podcast brings. What encouraged me to do podcast is to be behind this microphone with courageous people. Telling stories and being interviewed on a podcast requires courage. It's out of our comfort zone, especially that we talk about things we don't open up about with our friends or with our family. These are things that are in our heart and our mind, and only in our podcast setting we share them.
Absolutely, and those voices remain in the on the internet highway forever, so that people can relate to them. Wonderfully explained that. Now let's come to the human connections part. So you see, isn't it ironical when we talk of human connections, people all across the world, loneliness is also rising as rapidly as the population in the world. Only a few places the population is coming down, elderly, but the rise in loneliness is very stark for us to understand. Why is it so? Means, why are we humans not liking others to connect with humans, or not connecting with others the way we should be connecting? And in that process, we are feeling so lonely. What is your understanding of this?
Excellent question. I'm not an expert. The only research I can talk about is from own point of view, my own experiences with the people around me. For my personal experience is that I didn't want to be vulnerable and talk openly about what's hurting me, what's making me feel lonely. I put on a face that everything is going fine, even though I remember when I first moved from Lebanon to the Netherlands, I did not talk about where I come from, about the life that I lived in bomb shelters and queuing to buy bread, pretending I don't know my family so that each one of us will get a bag of bread. I was ashamed to talk about this. I pretend that I live the same life. People are traveling around me. I did not travel, but I kept my mouth shut. So I didn't share my life. That brought me into loneliness. The fact that I did not open up about my own experiences. For a very long time, I assumed that people don't want to hear about it. And when I started talking about it after 23 years, I felt embraced and others opened up for their stories. It's Look, we are living in our houses, being busy with our work, families and children and our own friends. The world becoming closer and smaller. With social media, it's even becoming more smaller. We're becoming less secure about ourselves to share our lives. Hopefully this is changing, because the more we have podcasts and people talking about their vulnerability, their truth, their authentic self, loneliness will be less. There are lonely people listening to podcasts, and we're making a difference in their lives. This is just thinking about that make me feel what I'm doing is valuable.
Right, right, Rola. Tell us a bit more about your podcast. You bring, people together there, they share their stories, and that removes their loneliness. Why do they choose to continue to be lonely? Is it that they are a bit apprehensive to share their stories, or is it that the world has also become a bit indifferent towards other human beings? And more artificial intelligence seems to be coming into our lives, and people think that we have become much more efficient, we are much more self-sustaining, that we do not need others in that way. But we are social beings, and we need, maybe we do not need anything from each other, but the connection is something which is very natural for us to make. Are we in this process hurting our own selves? Help us a bit more about your podcast and this whole sense of loneliness that is creeping into our lives.
We are not hurting ourselves. Everything new requires patience and we have to build trust. If we pick the artificial intelligence, as a podcaster, I embrace it because it helps me a lot to improve in what I'm doing, be efficient. Artificial intelligence is scary because it's new, and hopefully, we will use it in the right way to prevent any dangers. Look, the internet, we have the dark web, but we don't all use the dark web. AI can be like that. We're not all using it. Even without internet, without artificial intelligence, criminals are out there. There are wars, crimes, bad leaders, regardless what AI is going to do. It's even new for all the governments and the regulations. We can't be afraid of it as long as we are kind and behaving in a good manner. We protect ourselves. If we want to enter into the dark sides of it, we will hurt ourselves and the others. It's for our children to figure out if we've done it right or not. For us, it's still very new. How this to bridge into the podcast and loneliness, the conversations, we do care about each other's, but we are afraid to ask questions. If I ask you, how are you today? What your answer would be? I'm
Very
fine.
good, very good.
Very
How
good.
are you?
Yeah. But who knows? Maybe you woke up in a bad mood. Maybe you spilled the coffee on yourself and felt like your day is going to be a disaster. But you don't share with me this. You will tell me you're doing good. And this is not an answer. When we ask, how are you doing? We have to mean it and take a little bit of more time to listen to what the other is saying. We don't share sometimes. We don't want to share because the other is going to top it up with how they are feeling and how they experience the same. It takes away your story. It takes away the essence of the question and it kills the conversation. We end up in our loneliness. No one wants to listen. If they listen, they won't understand. If they understand, they want to share their own experience. To get out of this circle is to spend time being genuinely interested in that person who is telling us their story. And they might not open up in the beginning, but when we have the right questions that are authentic and really we care to know, they will open up. Now, coming on the podcast is a different story because when they come on the podcast, they don't know what questions are going to be asked. It is scary. And at the end, every guest I have tells me they didn't know they had it in them, the story. And I tell them this is their legacy on the podcast. As you mentioned, Ajay, it's there. They can listen to it, their children will listen to it, and it's not going anywhere. So, this beautiful story they told, or the authentic story, it might not be beautiful, it might be courageous and confronting. It is there. It surprises the individual after they tell it. These are deep conversations, and we should just embrace them.
Absolutely, absolutely. And talking of loneliness, you also talk about, that motherhood can be a lonely place, and that it is, for many, it is a taboo to say it out aloud. Now, mothers are one who, bring so much of happiness the world to the world, in their own manner. It's a sad thing to learn that they can be a motherhood can be lonely. Help us understand why do you say so, and how this can be tackled then.
Motherhood is lonely because we don't practice. We have our first child and we have to learn on the job. There is so much fear and love and feeling of missing out. I'm a mother now, but who am I as a person? And if I take my child out for a walk to the park, I see mothers smiling while they didn't sleep the whole night, loving their kids, while they really all they want is someone to look after them so they can have a break. And mothers don't talk about this. It's shame and disgrace if a mom would say, I feel so lonely, I need to have a conversation with a grown up with no kids around. But also, what triggers also the loneliness is that this image of life is perfect, I'm doing a great job raising my kid, I don't need an advice, I don't need help, I can do it all by myself. We end up lonely, trying to figure it all out while we don't have the experience. For my experience personally, I raised my kids away from family and friends because I live alone in the Netherlands with my Dutch husband, whose family lives also very far from us. I just did it all by myself. And some days I just cried thinking, this cannot be it. I thought being a mom, I will be like over the roof from happiness. But the beginning of it was really tough, and mothers did not share their stories with me. I read books, I tried to do the best I can, and this loneliness didn't go away. But there is a turnaround to it. When my kids, my daughters, were preteens, my son is born. And my preteens daughters and I have the best time raising their little brother all together. And I did not feel any moment of loneliness in this time. So at the end, we need a village to raise our children, to rest, to ask for help. It will take away the loneliness. And I hope that soon on my podcast, I can foster more that women, mothers, should not be afraid to ask for help. This does not undermine their capacity, does not undermine their love to their children. They need to rest and do fun stuff that do not involve babies and kids and talk about children.
Right, right, Rola. So I want to understand then, how can men understand more about this part of motherhood and be there when someone they love uh, so much, uh, they are there for them at the right moment, that they never feel lonely? Or is it that women are not able to articulate it, or is it that men are not able to? Because see, men are also getting lonelier by the day with the way the world is changing. They are having their own issues. Amidst the same time, when women empowerment is being talked about, feminist movements are going on there also. So I don't know where the problem is or where the respite is, but how can men and women, mothers and also their husbands, they can come together for the best of everyone? How can it happen?
I love your question. And I really want to thank you to give me this involved man point of view. You are very right. Men also are feeling lonely because the transition to fatherhood is also tough. We don't talk about it. Everyone is busy with the baby, with a mom who's just given birth, and sometimes her health is not coping well. And then the father is trying the mom, look after the baby, be happy that he became a father, but he's also not having enough sleep. He still have a job to answer to. And our work environment does not give the dad enough time off to enjoy also their children, especially when they're babies. I fully understand that men also feel lonely. How can we work together? And this is something important because women don't ask for help. And if we ask for help, we are not clear. We don't give clear timelines. We want it done right away. And if it's not done right away, we become annoyed and men think, okay, so then do it yourself. This communication and the expectations from each other must be clear. I did it all wrong in the beginning. It took me 3 children to practice. So, yes, for men, they really want to serve, they really want to help. I thought all my life that I'm a feminist, and this changed because the more I interview men, the more I understand we have exactly the same feelings, the same pain points. We're just not meeting each other and winning in being agreeing on something. So, I mean, as I said, I'm not an expert. I'm learning from my guests, I'm learning from my life experiences. And at the moment, I ask for help from my husband. When he asked me, how can I help you? I used to be upset and say, well, can't you see there is so much to do? And you're asking me, how can you help me? But now I understand he wants to help me. So I'd better tell him where I need his help than he will walk away and tell me again, you can do it all by yourself. And I'm not particularly talking about my husband, it's the general attitude because this is how we are wired. Men like to focus on a task, and if we give them this task, they will do it very good. We had
You have
women should lower our expectations in the high things we want to achieve. And men, they want to serve. So do what your wife is asking because this will make you both happy.
Absolutely, you have explained it very, very well. That it is nature, nothing wrong with both sides. It is nature that both have been wired differently from the time men and women were born, and that is the way we have been born. So we have to work out, like you said correctly, that women want that men are much more intuitive and understand the things around, but many a times men are more focused on the solution and they need clear cut tasks to be set out. And once that happens, men will be in a very happy position to actually, who are already eager to help out, but don't know where or how, what. But they know how. And if the task is clear, everything will become clear.
Absolutely.
Thank you for explaining. And that's why I was smiling and laughing a bit, because that seems to be a lot many cases I have seen, that whole enumeration. People want to help, but they are not clear about it. And sometimes, that leads to unhappy situations. The more communication is there, the better outcomes it is for happiness. So you see, you have yourself given solutions to both sides, that the answer is very much there for the loneliness that is creeping our worlds. But the more we communicate, the less problems we'll face, and the world can our own houses will become a happy place, and the world can become a much, much happier place. And even the workplaces will become happier in that whole sense.
Absolutely. Actually, we live in the same house and we could feel lonely because we are not connecting in the right way. The last thing I want to say about feminism, raising children, and relationship, I had a dad. My father passed away. I have a brother. I have a husband, and I'm raising a son. So if I want them to become the best man I can dream of, I also have to do the work to give them the space to be that.
Absolutely. Well explained. I think everyone needs that space. We just have to understand that everyone does need their space, whoever it is, man, women, even a pet that we keep in house, they also need their space. And if we intrude, they also can get angry and want to protect that. Wonderful, wonderful, Rola. One last thing I want to discuss about is the whole world is going through such a lot of change, and many a times you see war in the Middle East, war in Europe, and even in the there are all these clouds with China and Taiwan. You just don't know where the world is going. Amidst all these things, one thing I understand, even the understanding of others seem to be diminishing, whereas we are so much connected with each other through different means of communication that is available in today's time. You talk about the power of accepting others for who they are, or aspire to be. Help us a bit about this, how it can help each of us. What is this power of accepting others that you talk about?
This is a very difficult question, and it's much bigger than me discussing anything about it. Look, in Europe, I'm not going political here, but there are some realities that I would like to share. I come from the war. My family live in a country that is struggling, and they have a lot of refugees over there. I live in Europe, where my life is more secure, I hope, and there are also refugees. There is war at our doors. Horrible things are happening. The worst happened before, so we are still hopefully not getting into the worst of it. The thing is to embrace each other, to give the chance to learn and grow and accept each other. It's not always easy because there are different beliefs, different cultural differences, societal obligations. It's hard to be like so accepting and have no bias. Just if we look at each other and think each person have a story, people are not born bad or good. Their life experiences make them who they are. And if we're kind to each other and try to understand where the other person is coming from, we can have more safe and happy conversations. And if this is not possible, let's depart in peace. I'm not in power, so this is the life I wish we can have. And this is not happening, unfortunately. So I hope that we, as people, come together against every war anywhere. Sometimes I dream that we all go out on the streets in the entire world against every war in every place. Don't name names, don't carry flags, just against war. But this will be a dream. As long as I think of it, I hope I can have peaceful conversations.
Absolutely, absolutely. And this is, you are not the only one to dream this way. And I'm sure a lot of people want the world to be a much more peaceful, much more livable place. And for the way God made it to be. Be that as it may, I'm sure a lot of people would want to learn more about all these things from you and want to connect with you and your podcast. So, what is the best way for them to do so, Rola?
The best way is to listen to the Life Affairs podcast. Well, it has a Dutch name in it, Echte Levensverhalen. But if they look to the Life Affairs podcast, they will see my face. They will know that's the one. And they can connect with me on LinkedIn, Roula Abou Haidar. And of course, they can send me a DM if they want to tell their life story. Everyone is welcome.
Absolutely. With this, it's a wrap on this very special edition of the KJ Masterclass Live. Thank you so much indeed for joining us.
Thank you, Ajay. It was fun.